Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode. As always, wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on, thank you guys so much for the support, all the messages, all the great things that you've sent the show's way. I truly, truly appreciate all of it, and I love that. Getting all that feedback and hearing your guys' thoughts and suggestions and ideas and the things that you took away from the episodes is just really invigorating for me. And I really, really sincerely want to thank you all for checking this episode out as we dive into something that is a lot of fun, I think, to talk about when it comes to your coaching personality or your coaching style. Today, we're going to talk about the idea of being a demanding coach, but also a caring players coach. And I think that it's important to kind of address what it means to be both, because I'm sure as coaches we want to have really high expectations, we want to push our players to the limit and push them beyond what they think they're capable of, but at the same time we want to make sure our players know that we care about them and that we want what's best for them. And sometimes players may only see one side or think we're only, demonstrating one side of that personality. And I think it's really cool to be able to talk about how to be both, where your players know that you care about them, but you also know that they're going to push you to the fullest. So that's what I'm going to talk about with my guest today, who's going to talk about how he does it with his program. And so I'm very excited to have on the head boys basketball coach, Union Pines High School, Coach Zachary Marks, joining us today. Coach, again, really appreciate you being able to come on. How are we doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Talk, Coach, about your basketball journey and your coaching journey. Walk us through where this game of basketball has taken you and your coaching journey has taken you, and ultimately, how did you end up at Union Pines?
So Union Pines is kind of a really local spot for me. We're in Moore County, North Carolina, and for those who don't know where that's at, it's Union Pines is about 10 minutes outside of Pinehurst. Kind of golf capital. So kind of growing up, basketball was always, to me, it was always my second favorite sport growing up. I grew up as a big hockey guy. And then as I got older, just being around basketball is a lot more local than what hockey was. So it was easier to, go outside and grab a basketball and play. And, Carolina, Chapel Hill's 45 minutes down the road. So
yeah,
it's, super easy to fall in love with the game, being right here. So growing up, I actually went to our rival high school, which is Pinecrest. And after my junior year, got injured a little bit, and so I wasn't able to play after that. And the head coach at the time, who's actually the head coach at San Jose Community College right now, Coach Mike Apple, did a really good job of kind of taking me under his wing at that point, because he knew at some point coaching was what I wanted to get into. So he kind of put me in a situation to where I could help him out and help his other coaches out. So I wound up, doing that for my last couple of years. Went off to Wingate University for a couple of years, got my degree there, and when I graduated from Wingate, went to Southern Alamance High School, which is right outside of Greensboro, and had two really good mentors there that I worked under. The first one was Josh Hayes, who's now an assistant at Florida Atlantic, and then after that, Bill Flo, who's now a athletic director and a head coach up in Pennsylvania. So those two guys really took me under their wing as a 21-year-old coach who, right out of college and getting used to the whole teaching aspect, and showed me a lot of really good things. And and while I left Greensboro, interviewed for Pinecrest High School again. It wound up not working out, and the boys coach at Union Pines at the time was Nick Boney, who was actually one of the assistants at Pinecrest when I was a student there. He hit me up and he was like, "You want a job here?" And I was like, "Let's do it." So it was really cool working with a guy that taught me so much when I was in high school. And that's something this is always home for me. It'll probably be a spot that hopefully I retire at in 20 some years. But it's really cool being home.
Oh, that's really cool. I mean, what a cool journey to have such, great like local ties and being able to, be somewhere where you've kind of seen, I guess, in a way, right, the game of basketball kind of like evolve and everything from when you're younger to now. And I think that's really cool. And Coach, I wanted to ask you about something that I know you're passionate about, which is the concept of team chemistry, and it's one of those things that is maybe sometimes a little bit tricky to define. So I kind of want you to talk about, for you as a coach, how do you kind of assess, your team's chemistry? What does good chemistry look like? What does not so good team chemistry look like? And when you have that not so good team chemistry, what can a coach do to improve it?
It's been chemistry is such a hard thing to figure out.
Right? Yeah.
And this is only my third year as head coach, and it's crazy because I've been on both sides of it already.
Have you?
Um, we've had my first 2 years, we had teams who the guys were good basketball players, but they didn't. We had cliques in the locker room, cliques in the locker room, which led to kind of cliques on the court, and it wasn't something that you really see until afterwards. You kind of sit down at the end of the season. It's like, wow, okay, now it kind of makes sense. Um, and especially with the group that we have now coming up, is these guys really enjoy. You can just tell when they're on the court. They just they love to play basketball and they love to do it with each other. And I think it goes beyond the court in a lot of ways. These guys are always hanging out at, the football games on Friday nights, or, you know, going out on double dates with their girlfriends, or, all the really cool things that you would love as a coach to see. And now that it's actually happening, it's very cool to watch it kind of unfold. And it kind of makes you wonder, what were you doing wrong the first couple years, or when you have a year that's the team chemistry is not as good as what it is now.
Is there a way, in your opinion, that you think a coach might be able to see kind of like those warning signs of bad chemistry? Are there things that you can kind of look back on and be like, oh, I should have noticed that earlier. Or I wish I would have noticed that earlier because I would have been able to like stop that so that that bad chemistry would have formed. Like, would you have been able, you think, looking back, to like notice that those clicks were forming like right away?
Yeah, I think it's for me, it's spending more time in the locker room.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
whether it's joking around with the guys pre or post workouts that we're having right now, just like seeing how much they're joking around with each other in the locker room, or they might throw something up on the TV and just sit down and enjoy watching it with each other. And or they come in my classroom before school starts, as soon as workouts are over, and just joking around with each other and pulling up YouTube highlights of all these guys that I grew up watching, and they're like, "Oh, look at this move and this move," and it's just like I said, it's just really cool to see. And then a lot of these kids have grown up playing with each other. But now our school is such a big military school. Like I said, we've got potentially three new transfers coming in that can make an impact for us on varsity. And these guys have really taken them under their wing, and they've gelled like they've known these kids for 18 years. And that's been extremely helpful. But it's like I said, it's really, really cool to see as a coach, them just being like, all right, this guy can help us, and we're going to make sure we do everything to make sure like he's comfortable with us.
And that's pretty big too, because you could definitely be in a situation where guys get worried about somebody coming in, like, quote unquote, taking their spot, or, taking minutes from them, and maybe seeing them as a threat. But it sounds like you guys are just like welcoming everyone. They can see that these guys coming in are good players, and they care about them and want them to do well. And it's like there doesn't seem like there is much ego or kind of selfishness necessarily involved.
Yeah, and I think we were pretty young when I first started. We had a lot of sophomores on varsity,
Hmm.
which didn't lead to a great season for us, but we knew it was a building block going forward. And I think that you get a sophomore who starts 22 out of 24 games as a sophomore on varsity, it automatically inflates their ego a little bit. But then, kind of the reality hits, and senior year comes along, and they're like, look, I'm tired of losing. I just want to win basketball games, and like I want to enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's hard as a 15-year-old, I'm sure, to put an ego aside when you know that you're the best player on a team or you're the best rebounder on a team, but to know that like these guys are now doing whatever they can because all they want to do is win games and they just love playing basketball. Like I said, I'll keep saying it and you'll probably get tired of me saying it. It's just like really cool to see every morning when we have workouts.
Well, I think it's really cool to kind of see, like you kind of mentioned about the shift in focus from your guys from sophomore to, junior and senior year, where now, maybe at the beginning they were the sophomores, kind of like you said, had their ego up a little bit and were kind of, really feeling, good about themselves on an individual level. But now, as they see kind of the end of the road of their high school career as seniors, like they're more team focused and they're more about, the success that the team's going to have. And to be able to kind of not just look at it from an individual standpoint, but to want the team to do well and do whatever it is they can for them to do well. I mean that's great, like senior leadership, and really cool to see like that development. I'm sure over the years to see them kind of grow into those roles.
Yeah, we play in a really hard conference.
Hmm.
So like last year, 6 of the 7 teams made it to the playoffs. And it's something where anybody can win any night. We had one team who actually had a kid who's an NC State commit now,
Well,
who graduated last year. And like he was giving everybody 40 a night, and there was nothing you could do to stop it because they had skill guys all around him. But then everybody else in the conference is so good that, we started off the season 9-1 and we finished 10-15. So it's like,
yeah, that's great.
your first half of the season was super successful, but then if you look back, like we were 1-14 to end the year, and it's like that should be your driving motivation, not starting 9-1, but
Yeah,
like
you start well and then the way it ends.
right,
Yeah.
like there's a lot of work that we had games we should have won that we let go, and vice versa. Like it's just it's hard because you don't want to put the focus on winning, but I think with this group that we have now, winning is such a motivator that
Right.
they've gotten a little taste of success. So like we met one of our goals last year of making it to the playoffs. It was on the road. It was a 3-hour drive. We went there and it was against the number one team on the east side of the bracket, and we played with them for 3.5 quarters, and they wore us down at the end. So now our guys are like, you know what, we play them again, they're coming to our place. Like that's the motivation this year is teams come to us during the playoffs, not we travel.
No, 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 that's awesome. It just sense from your answer, just the level of kind of motivation and desire that those guys have. That's really cool. I appreciate you sharing that. Coach, we talk about this concept here as a kind of shift into the topic of um the being demanding, but also being a caring players coach. So I want to kind of focus first on the demanding part, so to speak. We know that to be a coach that has really high expectations, there has to be those non-negotiables. There has to be that culture of like really high expectations and things that are just this is the standard of how things are done. And so I'm curious for you at Union Pines, what do you and what have your coaching staff or even what have the players kind of established as what are those non-negotiables? What are those expectations that are set for any player who's coming into your program?
I think a lot of it starts outside of being on the court. Like
Okay.
when you're in the classroom, like this is what you're doing. I'm checking your grades 3 or 4 times a week, and if you're not up to par, you're not playing. Like you're not touching the ball at practice. You're sitting somewhere and you're working on your classwork. So then you take that, and that gives them a little extra motivation to, freshman and sophomore year, put a little bit more of an emphasis on grades than if they weren't playing basketball. And then you kind of get into the basketball side, and it's when you walk in this gym, we tell them like there's no extra baggage that comes with it. Like you walk in this gym, basketball is you can love that basketball as much as you want to, and it's going to love you right back. Like you don't, no matter what else is going on that day, no matter if you had a bad day at school, a bad test grade, if your girlfriend's mad at you, whatever it is, like you walk in that gym and it's no longer about you, it's about the other 14 guys and coaches that are in the gym because now we're your biggest supporters. And then, stemming off that, it's just holding each other accountable in practice. Like if you see a guy who's we're doing ball handling drills and the coach's back's turned and he's slowing down on a layup or doing, up and unders when we're trying to finish off two and doing anything that we're not asking them to do, guys calling them out and guys making sure that no matter what we're doing in the gym, that it's all productive. Like we're not in the gym just to, shoot 43 pointers and see if we can make 25 of them. Like we're in the gym to work on our offhand. We're in the gym to get in your face and play defense because we want to do that for 32 minutes in a game. We're in the gym to cause as much ruckus as we can on defense and really make that our transition into offense. And I mean, it's taken a little time. I would say that's kind of one of the hardest things to do, taking over a program, is establishing that culture. And I think that's the biggest word in sports right now, whether it's high school or college, is once you create the culture that you want, then it all falls down underneath it. But if you don't have that right culture and the right mindset, and it's got to start from the head coach and trickle down, it's never really going to work like you want it to.
So what was that process then of putting in that culture of the way that, practices were meant to be had and the intensity level and everything that was going on in your program? Was that a big adjustment for your guys? Was there some growing pains and things you had to, kind of reinforce or kind of have to reteach to them? Or what was that process like of instituting this?
I think for the most part, the beginning was smooth, I thought. But now going back, there's so many other things that I would go back and change. And that's just the part of, I know we'll talk about it later, is once you have what you want your program to look like and you have your goal set, don't stray away from it. No matter what, like if you have to lose a junior or senior because they don't want to buy into that, and it takes you losing 3 or 4 more games in a season, like so be it. But we want 12 guys, 14 guys, however many guys in the gym that want to play basketball and want to play better and get better and make each other better all the time. And if you're not a part of that, we tell them like we're the Vikings, so we tell them like just jump off the ship, like we don't need you. Like and we just, it's just something you got to be brutally honest with the guys. Like if you're not going to do this, then we don't need you and we don't want you. And so I think like as a high schooler, sometimes that can be really hard to hear, because it's not that I don't love the kid, but it's like, I'll love you outside of this sport no matter what. But if you're not going to help what we've got right here, then I'm sorry. Like I'm only going to love you outside of this sport.
And I think that's hard for players who might have like gotten used to maybe like getting away with things, or they're the most talented player, one of the most talented players, and so like like coach says this, but if I do this, like he's really not going to bench me, or he's not going to remove me from the team or anything. And I think even as for coaches too, that's also something to consider, is that you can have these like great ideas, which I do think they're great, about the way that you want your culture to be and the expectations that you want, but making sure that you enforce them for every single one of your players. Because if it's your best player and they're not following through with what you need to do, they need to get the exact same consequences that anyone else would.
Exactly. And I think that's something that you struggle with as a first year head coach. And then it kind of takes a couple years to develop from there, is if like you hate to say it, but if it's a 5 point game late, 3 minutes left on the clock and your best player does something, like my first year, if I would go back, I would change the way that whole situation, because now if I'm not doing it to my best player, what makes the guy coming off the bench think that he has to come in and he can't stray away from what our best player did also?
Yeah.
And I think we were pretty good with that the first couple of years. I think there's definitely some things that we could have changed, but we were pretty, I would say, out of all of our expectations, we probably met them at 80%, 85%, which you think it's good. But now looking back at the group that we've got and the expectations and just following through with everything, it's like, well, dang, it would be so much easier. Like you kind of wonder where those teams would have been the 2 years ahead of us. Like 2 years behind us if you would have followed through with every single thing that you wanted to.
Yeah, but it's that's a tough part. That's I think a tough part of starting that journey is that you want to make a good impression, you want to do well, you want to be successful, and I think for me at least, in being in those situations where mine, culture so to speak was tested, it really had to make me think about like what is it that I valued, what is it that I believed, and were there things that like what were my non-negotiables, and I think also sometimes it can even go the other way where there's things that you think are super important and really matter to you, but maybe they're not as big of a deal, and then maybe other things that you were like, this isn't a big deal, all of a sudden they do actually really matter to you. And I think that's what makes that first year really tough, or first couple of years rather, is that really figuring out like what matters to me as a coach, what will I accept, what won't I accept. And I don't think there's any shame in that being a multi-year process, so to speak.
Yeah, am I being a Carolina fan growing up, like my favorite, I never really understood it until this third year.
Hmm.
Was if you think about like what Dean Smith always said, he was like the first year, you grow a little bit. The second year, you kind of grow a little bit, and then the third year is your year as a head coach. Like so, and if you kind of think about it into perspective, you take over a program the first year, and some of the expectations, if it's such a big change, guys are like, this isn't the way we used to do it, so I'm gonna still do it this way. And then the second year, if they're a senior at that point, then it's like, it's my senior year. I'm not really going to do it. Some of the sophomores are kind of get aggravated with the seniors because, they want it to be a certain way, but the seniors are just kind of ready to get out the door. And
Yeah.
now the third year, it's like everybody that's on the team has been doing that if they're sophomores, sophomore, junior, senior year. So now they're used to that flow. They're used to the expectations. They're used to how you coach in the games and practices and what you're like outside of the locker room and things like that. So I think that also, like, it's so frustrating sometimes as coaches, but you just gotta understand, like, year three year three is your year, and then after
Yeah.
that hopefully you continue that uphill climb.
Yeah, multi-year process for sure. It's definitely not something that all gets fixed overnight, definitely. So with those demands that you talked about, now for your guys, how do they also know that even though you have these really high expectations for them, you're also there for them and you care for them? How can a coach make sure that their players know that like they still care about them, they still want what's best for them, even when they're pushing them to these really high limits and really high standards?
I mean, I think the first part is you've got to be able to have those honest conversations like we talked about a few minutes ago, which
Hmm.
is, like I said, which was really hard for high schoolers to kind of understand. But I feel, and as they mature, then those conversations get a little bit easier. Um, but also at the same time, just like, it sounds so cliche, but I try and do it after every conversation I have with the guys. Like, I'll tell them I love them, and they know that it's true.
Yeah.
Like, and I just, it's crazy that your whole perspective changes. Like last year was October 13th. Me and my wife had our first kid, and then October
Congratulations.
31st tryouts were. And so I took 2 weeks away from school and then hopped right into basketball. And I felt
Wow.
like the first 3 months of watching my son grow, like, I really didn't see him at all.
Hmm.
And like, I tell him, like, y'all are, during basketball season, I see y'all more than I see my wife and kid. And
Yeah.
so I think, like, just, you've got to, one, support them, because if they support you at the same time and they care back for you, and they're not, every time you turn your back, they're not rolling their eyes at you, or they're not making excuses. And
Hmm.
I think I mean, and it's so easy now to, like, just send a kid a text message that I don't know if coaches necessarily do it enough. Like, hey man, like, we had a transfer that was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make it today. I'm, kind of feeling under the radar. It's like, all right, well, look, I hope I see you in the morning for workouts, but if not, feel better. Like, I'll see you when you get better. And I feel like that's such an easy thing that can get lost as coaches, is kind of like, you only look at your sport and that's all that you care about. When these kids are, working outside of school, or they're going to the football games, and I'm having conversations with them Friday nights, and they're holding my kid, and then my wife brings the kid into practice, and the guys are kind of passing him around for a few minutes. And just like, even social media, it's so hard to get lost into.
Yeah.
But if you kind of like it, every high schooler at some point has a dream of playing college basketball. And
Right.
it's so easy just to be like, I'm going to share your Instagram post. And that, like, the smallest thing in the world that takes 5 seconds to do means the world to some of these kids,
Absolutely.
because it's like, oh, that coach kind of cares. Like, I've got 3 potentially varsity guys in my third period math class, and we're done with work today. And at 10 o'clock, they're all getting ready because they want to post a Instagram post at 10 o'clock, all 3 of them, separate ones. And they're like, all right, well, make sure at 10:01 the basketball account repost it. I was like, don't worry, I will. Like, I got you. And it's like, I don't know if you don't have the right relationship with the kids, they might just kind of brush that off. But I think it's just something kind of cool that I can do that kind of just shares what the kids love to do.
Right. I think that it's so interesting that you bring that up, that we're all so connected on social media. We all have access to, Instagrams or Twitters or everything to our account, that it's almost like too convenient that we think, oh, we can always do this. We can always reshare something or send something out or send a message to a guy. Like, we can do that at any point that we want, but it's almost like it's so accessible to us that, like, we don't do it because we know we could just kind of do it whenever. And
Right.
to your point, right? Like, we could take, a minute, right now, like those of you like listening, right? Or you can take a minute right now, send off a message to your guys. I could, when we're done, right? Send off a message to a girl, or uh, retweet something, or make a post right there. And it seems like something so, simple, and like, oh, it's just a post or whatever. But like that communication, and that it's like, wow, like this coach like is spending time outside of like the day to like share this about me or check up on me or see how I'm doing. And for some of our players, they might not even have an adult in their life who does that for them. So it's huge.
Yeah, 100%.
What do you think, coach, has kind of been the benefit from being a player's coach? How has that helped your teams be successful in the past? Because I know, and this may be more of that like old school mentality of like, never let them see a smile, push them, push them, push them, and don't worry if they like you at the moment, they'll be fine, and they'll be fine later on, so to speak. But how do you know? How can you look back on your coaching career and know that like me being a player's coach has helped our teams be successful? What are some moments that you can kind of draw from where you kind of felt that your team succeeded because they knew that you had their back?
It's it's such a fine line. Um, like, for me growing up, it was always like, you're silent on the bus rides. When we're practicing, we're just practicing. We don't have anything else going on. And now it's like, sometimes we have our best practices when we've got music going in the gym, or when the guys are loose before a game, because we're letting them, you kind of tell them on the bus, like, hey, I'm good with y'all if y'all are talking. I'm good if you're listening to music that's a little bit louder, but as long as you're still getting focused, then that's all that matters. Like, we want you to be yourself. And it's so hard because I think there's that really fine line with officiating now of being yourself versus taunting. And I'm like, we lost a game last year that we shouldn't have lost because we hit a 3 and one of our guys celebrated that put us up 2 with like 30 seconds left, and we got a tech
Yeah.
for it.
Wow, really?
And so it's kind of like, after the game, I was like, look, man, like, I love you, but like, you can't do, there's a time and place for everything. And I think that's something that this year's team, they still talk about. They're like, man, if we wouldn't have done this, like, we would have won that game. Uh, and it's really, being a player's coach is really all about your culture. And I think it's easy because being a 30-year-old coach that I can listen to the same music as them, which I may not listen to all the music they listen to,
Yeah.
but I can listen to the same music with them and I can relate to them with that. Or like this summer, I was talking to one of our point guards during the NBA Finals, and I was like, "Look, when Luca comes off these ball screens and he's snaking the ball screens, putting the defender on his back, like that's something you could be working on every single day." And he was like, "Oh yeah, like even high schoolers can do that." I'm like, yeah, like he's just a little bit more advanced than what you're doing. I'm not asking you to be Luca, but I'm asking you to be yourself. So I
Mm,
think that we're in our style of play, we run a lot of 5-out continuity offenses
mm-hmm.
where it's teaching guys how to play basketball instead of teaching guys how to be so robotic in you're setting the screen and you're rolling to the spot every single time, or I'm going short corner every single time, and I'm not straying away from any of that. And so it's
Right.
kind of just teaching the guys the game of basketball. And I'll tell them like, look, if you've got a guy on you that's a mismatch, like, and I'll even yell it, like I'll yell, kill him, like take him. Like nobody else in that gym is like that kid cannot guard you, and I'm gonna keep giving you the ball until they switch it up. And so you kind of again, it's that fine line of the kids playing basketball the way you want them to play basketball, but not letting it cross into kind of that AAU freelance type basketball. Like we're teaching guys how to back cut. We're teaching guys how to, you know, if you're able to face cut somebody, we're turning and sealing them at the rim. Like we're not just making a cut just to make a cut. We're looking to score every single time you touch the basketball, or we're making the one more pass to make sure the next guy scores for us. So, like I said, I think that's the biggest thing is I never really growing up, I never found a system that I loved. And now that I've found a 5-out offense and just a free flow type offense that we run, it's hard as a coach because some of us can be so hard headed in being old school and running the same stuff over and over and over. When I don't have two true post players to run a high low game all the time.
Right.
But
You
so
you have to be flexible.
you have to be flexible when doing it, and you have to make sure like you're doing what's best for the kids, not what's best for what you think is going to make you successful. And I'll tell the guys during games, like, you come to a huddle, if you see something maybe that I'm not seeing or one of our assistants are seeing, like, tell me. Don't just sit there and be quiet. Like, if it's something that can benefit our basketball team, I want you to tell me. I want you to, if you see you might see a drill on defense that you like and you might bring good energy to practice, send it to me.
Mm-hmm.
And if it works, awesome. We'll keep using that thing. And if it doesn't, we'll trash it. That's just part of that's part of the whole social media thing that's so cool is like these kids can now send you TikTok drills or Instagram reels that are drills that could be super beneficial. And I've got drills now that we run that a freshman has sent me or a sophomore has sent me that's like, oh,
It's
I didn't even
cool.
think about that drill.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, but then
Yeah.
that player is like, oh, well, coach, I showed you that drill. Like, that's pretty cool. Like, yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You showed me that and it worked. And like what's cool about that and what's cool about your answer is I think that sometimes there's kind of a misconception about like being a demanding coach means it's all like top down and like there is no input from the players and it's kind of like you're the um person who has all the power and control and authority and then the players don't get any say in anything. But like from and some of the things that you just described about players coming up and suggesting things or in a timeout suggesting things, it's as if your demands for your players are that they're talking and that they are coming up to you with ideas and suggestions that you kind of expect and need them to use their voice and speak up about things, and that it's not just a dictatorship for a lack of a better word, but like you kind of demand and have that expectation that players are using their voice to advocate for the team and advocate for themselves for the things that they want out there. And I think that that's kind of a little bit of a nuance to that word of what it means to be a demanding coach.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, like, if you ask the guys, like, there's times where, again, that's just part of the demanding part is whether you're the best player on the team or I'm not going to say the worst player on the team, but you might be the guy that doesn't get as much minutes. Like, I'm going to act the same way towards you. And I'm not going to stray away from that. Like, I'm going to be super demanding that, if you've got an open shot, that you're taking it. But at the same time, like, if your teammate's diving for a loose ball, the best player's going to help that player up, and the guy who's not getting as many minutes, like I'm making sure he's going to get the guy up as well. And
Hmm.
that all goes back to we've got a really good assistant coaches that help us out doing that. Um, and I think it helps the players even past basketball. Like
Hmm.
now they're learning how to communicate with each other to be leaders. They're open to constructive criticism. They've got to learn. Like it's hard for a 15-year-old to come up to you and be like, look, man, like that's not, here's what you should do on that ball screen next time if the defender hedges it. Like, and it's hard because like, nah, man, like you don't know what you're talking about. And then you kind of go through the film. It's like, nah, he was right. Like
Yeah.
you're not right all the time. And once you learn that, again, that's what helps the team be successful is now you're putting your ego to the side and you're letting teammates talk to you a little bit about things. And it's just really cool to see once guys start doing that. And like I was
Yeah.
talking to one of our players the other day and he was like, Coach, like we just want to hoop and we just want to do anything we can. Like when we're in the gym, like we just want to ball and we just want to like have a good time with each other. And I was like, and
Hmm.
that's what it should be.
Yeah, like that goes back to that team chemistry part that you talked about. You know, these guys who like love playing with each other and love the game of basketball and everything. And part of that I imagine is just kind of the coaching style you have in terms of wanting it to. I think you talked about going to that 5 out, having players get a lot of freedom and choice. Where I can tell that you have certain demands in terms of like the way that they're playing and what it is that they're um how it is that they're playing in terms of being successful in their execution, but also like I feel like you care about them as basketball players as well as people, but as basketball players, and that you don't want them to be robotics. I think you use that term about not being robots, so you like care about them enough to learn the game of basketball by giving them opportunities to be a little bit more of decision makers and a little bit more free flowing.
Right. 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 Yeah. And I think that can be so hard to do in high school because, in high school, you're only given a certain pool to pull from. When in college,
Hmm.
like, you pick and choose it's easier to have one system and stick to it because you get to recruit to that system. And I think
Sure.
that's the really cool thing about high school. And I think that's what, at some point to make high school coaching a little bit harder is one, you don't have all the tools that colleges have to break down. You don't have, 9 graduate assistants breaking down film or tagging things in practice for you. So like sometimes, it takes all the coaches and sometimes it takes the players too to do some of the dirty work and around the locker room and around the school and things like that. So like just holding each other accountable when doing that is makes high school really, really fun because you've got to be flexible, but you also can't be so stuck in your ways that's what makes it miserable for the basketball players. And I think
Yeah.
in this day and age, like kids can get so frustrated with like a coach because the kid's like, oh, he's not using me like how I know I'm good.
Hmm.
And I think that's why kids like playing for our school is like we're going to cater to how you, as long as you fit into our basketball program and as long as you're willing to do every single thing that we're asking you to do and you're not being a knucklehead and you're just giving everything you have to our program, like we're going to make sure that we're successful with what you can do. I'm not going to ask you to do anything crazy, but and that's just the demanding part is like holding those kids accountable and knowing if you're going to be a part of this program, like you've got to do X, Y, and Z. And
Yeah.
once you do X, Y, and Z, and once you're able to figure that out, like you're going to help us be super successful and you're going to really enjoy your 2, 3, 4 years on varsity, however long you have.
Mm. No, that's really well stated, right? There's a certain this has to get done, certain process, certain buy-in, certain things that need to happen. But when those happen, like all these doors of opportunities will open up and all the playing time and the freedom and in some respects that there's a lot that players get rewarded about or rewarded with, it seems, once they show that they are committed to that initial buy-in process.
Yeah. And I think like we try and do some pretty cool things with our players. Like, we'll ask them, like this year, for example, I've already told the guys, I was kind of old school on game days. You wear shirt and ties. And they were like, Coach, do we have to wear shirt and ties? Like, what if we all wore golf polos that's got Union Pines basketball on it and khaki pants? All right, I'm good with that. Like, you may not want to wear a shirt and tie all the time, but as long as we look unified and we look as a team, like it's just one of those things that's so simple to do as a coach. Like you could be like, no, we're wearing shirt and ties, and I don't care if you don't. You might look like your nice dress shirt just came out of the laundry basket, and it's going to be so wrinkled because you didn't iron it, and that's honestly
I've
going to
seen
drive me
those.
even more crazy
Oh yeah.
than just like putting a polo on. You know what I mean?
No, I've definitely seen that. I've definitely seen like on game day. I'm like, oh man, what crumpled up ball did this shirt just come out
Uh,
of? You look like a
I
mess.
know, I know.
That's funny. Um, I know we touched on it a little bit earlier, but let me get back to it, Coach, about, those high expectations in terms of execution, in terms of the ways that practices are structured, or the expectations that you have for your guys, maybe on an offensive or defensive end. So when you're going for your practices and you're going for your practice planning or training with your guys, how do you go about your structure, your practice planning, your training that you're doing with your guys so that you're getting a lot of things done, but also they're leaving in a good mood and in good spirits as well?
Right. Uh, so when we do our typical off season, and I change the verbiage with everything, and I think it's really important for the guys to kind of understand. Instead of us saying off season, we say me season, and that's you're doing everything you can to polish your skills,
Mm.
add some more. If you're a big wing, adding some ball handling skills on top of that. But as soon as tryouts start, it's we season. So it's not off season, in season. It's me season and we season. And so like right now, what the way we have practices is we go for an hour and a half, and we do probably 30 to 45 minutes of just straight skill work, whether it be ball handling, ball screens. Uh, it could be 30 minutes of defense one day where we're working on ball gap and help and closeouts and things like that. But like fine tuning little skills, and we'll do that even when the season comes, is 30 minutes of skill work. And I think it's so hard when you get into a season of being like, I only want to focus on, how my next game's going to go. And it's like, yeah, your next game might be coming up, but like if your guys can't come off a ball screen in your offense, then like what are you going to do with it? So
Yeah, yeah.
we try and fine tune all those little skills now to where when we get into we season, in season, like we're taking that and just taking it one step forward. And right now we're doing a lot of 2-on-2, 3-on-3. And when we get into the in season, like we're looking at 4-on-4s and more 5-on-5 stuff. And I think you've got to make sure, and again, this is one of those fine lines of skill work. Is it 1-on-0 or is it 1-on-1? Or is it 2-on-0 or is it 2-on-2? Because what's going to be more beneficial? Like when are you ever going to have a 2-on-0 layup line or a 2-on-0 finishing drill? Like, so we try and do everything to where it transitions straight into a game. So it's a lot of 1-on-1 drills. Like I said, we do a really good 3-on-3 closeout drill that gets guys in ball gap and help, and it turns into a 3-on-3 live period that's got one more passes being established during it. And so it's just like that's kind of how we structure our practices. And we may spend 25 minutes on transition offense one day, and we might spend 20 minutes the next day on our 5-out offense. But during our transition time, it's like I said, it's not 5-on-0, it's 5-on-3 or 5-on-4, where it's disadvantage drills for the offense, disadvantage drills for the defense, where we're working that whole offense defense at the same time.
I like that concept of what you said is kind of like a me season versus we season, and it's a really cool like point that you brought up about like how, and I've struggled this, I know, as a coach too sometimes, is, I have all these great ideas in the in season time of things that I want to work on and things I want to do, but then, finding that our players maybe don't really have the skill set or haven't really worked on the skill set in the summer to work on that. It's like, well, like what was I using that summer for? Like what were we
Right.
really accomplishing that summer if, as you mentioned, when girls still like can't, read a screen correctly, or they can't, get off a ball screen or cut effectively, or make a post move correctly, like all that in-season planning that I'm doing and team stuff I want to do sounds great, but if like we didn't develop any of those skills, then like what are our chances of being successful in that when the actual game happens?
Yeah, and I was listening to your podcast the other day when you were talking to the University of, I think it was a Washington assistant.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, and he was talking about their verbiage. And I think that's super important for high school kids
Hmm.
is you've got, especially depending on how they are coming out of middle school, is they might learn the same thing but have heard it 15 different words. So when we get to drills, we work on, on our defense coming off ball screens. If we're going to double the screens, we tell them like it's like a fade haircut, like you're going high and tight to double it.
Uh-huh.
And so it's just like you've got to make sure that your verbiage isn't, as an adult, something that's going to overwhelm a high school kid. Like you've got to make it so simple to where when they hear this, this is what they think. Not, well, what does it mean to ice this ball screen? When really we
Mm.
can just say baseline, like force that guy baseline, get on his hip, force him baseline. And we
Yeah.
might call it like hip base or something like, just like simplifying. I think you can simplify the game so much in high school to where as an adult it might seem too easy to do, but it fits perfect for a high school kid. And it's just, I think that's the same thing that if you can establish for a high schooler some of the verbiage that they're going to need for college, it makes that process so much easier for when they get to college and they start playing ball, is they're not having to learn all these different schemes and verbiage for that.
Mm. And to your point about what you mentioned about the idea of also like putting players in a system where they have a lot of decision making and they have a lot of freedom, because if they are playing at the next level, who knows what sort of system that college coach might want them to be in. So if they're like well versed and just understand the game from just a IQ standpoint of how to be successful in what it means to have a successful offense or successful defense, hopefully that player can be thrown in any system and they'll do well.
Yeah, and that's like it's going back to simple verbiage. Like for me
Hmm.
and for our team, we've got a couple what would traditionally be called posts. Like we've got some high school kids that are 6'6", that yeah, it looks like they're playing in the post for us, but we don't call them post players. Like we call them wings, because then they think of, oh, a post player is I'm only sitting on the block
Back
and
to the
I'm
basket.
only
Yeah.
I'm only going back to the basket and I'm not touching the ball anywhere else. When essentially we might run the offense to where your back's to the basket most of the time, but it's off a pick and roll, and you might be starting on the wing, you might be starting at the elbow, but I'm not calling. It's so weird because if you sit there and call a 6'6", a 6'7" kid a post player,
Hmm.
they're like, dang, and it kind of like hurts their ego a little bit. And and again, that's like you got to be demanding toward them, like we talked about earlier. Is you got to tell them like, look, man, in high school you're a post, or you're a wing for us. When you go to college, you're like, if you're 6'6", you're not a post player. Like you're going to be on the wing. And so that's why I'm getting used to calling you a wing. That's why I'm getting used to you doing a little bit more coming off ball screens. And we kind of work on that in the off season, is fine tuning those little skills that's going to translate if you go play college ball, but also at the same time, we need you to do this, but now you've got that in your toolbox post high school.
Yeah, high school post player versus college post player, much different makeup, right? Much different skill set and look of
100%.
what they're going to be looking like. So yeah, that's I think you mentioned, right? That 6'4", 6'5" player that you have, or 6'6" player that they're not a post player at really at any college level. They better have some handles to them.
Right.
That's funny. I wanted to ask you about what when you're having conversations with players, and this is kind of something I just thought about during our conversation, when you're having like those post game talks, or you're having those one-on-one conversations, maybe at the end of the season or post-season talks of players. Let me talk about the post game first, because I think in the post game, that's a real kind of emotional time, depending on how the game ends and depending on how the game situation is. What are your conversations like with your players where you kind of let them know how you thought things went, but also kind of make sure things leave on a positive? How do you kind of navigate, those post game speeches or post game talks, so to speak?
I think it kind of goes both ways. Like here's if we win,
Hmm.
when we win, we've got music playing in the locker room. if it's a home game. We don't really do it at away games. But we're going to celebrate a little bit in the locker room. If it's at home, we're really going to celebrate. We're going to have music going. Like, we're going to get them out fairly quick, but we're going to have music and we're going to talk to them. We're going to be like, look, awesome job. We can work on this, this, and this come tomorrow. But in the end, like, we can fix those things. But we did what we had to do tonight to win. And that's really all that matters. Um, and then when it's a loss, it really kind of just depends on the loss. Like, if you're we went to Polk County High School this year, which is in not far from Fayetteville, North Carolina. And it's one of the coolest gyms to play in, I think, in North Carolina.
Okay.
It is they've got about 5 sections of bleachers, and the bleachers are maybe 4 or 5 feet from the court. And then in one of the open ends behind the basket, they've got a row of bleachers that go maybe 15 high. And that's the biggest part of the gym. And so, like, we went there on a Friday night, senior night, and I tried to warn them, like, guys, this place is going to be crazy. Like, I've been in here where it looks like Rucker Park dudes standing around the court. And that's exactly what it was. And so it's like a shell shock moment for them. And I told them after the game, like I think we were down by 15 going into halftime. And I was like, look, dude, like, this is a rough game. It's a rough spot we're playing in. And, like, you got to freaking battle. And this is one of those things that you got to be honest with the players, but at the same time, like, they can kind of relate to it. I told them, I was like, look, I don't care if we need a police escort after we win this game. Like, we need to do everything you can to win this freaking game. And, like, second half energy was insanely different. And it's just like, you got to read the game and be able to talk to the guys. And we wound up losing the game. We went to overtime, had a shot to win it. That kind of rimmed out. But, like, dudes still talk about it now. It's like, do you remember how it was like playing in that game? It's like, yeah, but we could have done this to win the game. And it's like, yeah, I know. Like, you told us that post game. I was like, all right, well, you got to make sure that you don't sit there and berate the kids nowadays. You can't talk to them different. And we all, as head coaches, hopefully we understand that it's just a completely different atmosphere nowadays, to where you can't talk to them the same way that maybe we were growing up. But I think that's the same way across, no matter what it is. So it's like, you got to tell them, we could have done this, we could have done this, we could have done this. I saw good in this, I saw good in this. We're going to fix it, and we're going to be okay. And then we move on from it, and that kind of is what it is, just as long as we don't lose sight of our end goals.
No, yeah, I love that speech too. I love that, your guys, I'm sure, needed, a little bit of a confidence boost. They needed to know, like, hey, like, you got your back, right? Like, there's that caring part there. It's like, hey, like, we're all in this together. Like, I know it's a difficult environment that we're all out here, but we're in it, and we're all getting after it together here. So, like, let's make something happen. And for them to have that sort of, like, excitement about it, right? They believed in the message that you sent. And I think that's where players really, as a coach, you can really tell if your players care about you is if they respond to
Yeah.
a message like that, because then they know, like, okay, like, he said it and I also believe it because I know that, like, he's demonstrated that he's cared about me and wants our program to be successful, wants me to be successful. So we're going to go out there and give it everything that we got.
Right. And I think that's,
I wanted to go ahead.
I'm
No,
kind
go
of
ahead.
old school when it comes to not old school when it comes to coaching, but, like, I'm the type of coach, like, I hate to sit down during games. Like, I'm not sitting. If we need a defensive stop, like, I'm smacking the floor, I might be in a
Mm-hmm.
defensive stance, like, but I feel
Oh
like
yeah.
that translates to the court. Like, it's the moment as soon as I sit down, if your energy falls off, it's a direct reflection of me. And so that's what the guys have to see is, like, look, even in practice, like, I'm going to yell, I might run around a little bit, I might act crazy for a little while, and that's fine because I need you to do the same thing. So when it comes to games, like, I need you to have that same intensity because I'm going to have it from start to end, no matter what the score is. No
Yeah,
matter
that's your
if it's
authentic
a
self
20,
there. Mhm.
right? Like, if it's a 20-point blowout, like, I'm going to be me, and I need you to do the same thing because you're still working on yourself. No matter if you think you're playing 5 minutes a game, like, when you come in at the end, you're still working on what you need to do to help this team in the long run.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I think that, when you demonstrate that this is who I am, and this is my personality, and this is what I believe in as a coach in terms of my energy level and the way I'm going to be, getting up and down during a game or up and down at a practice. Like once you stop doing that or you change gears on that, like that definitely can throw your players off because they know like something's wrong, something's happened here, and now coach is acting this way when he or she never acts that way before. And that could be really detrimental, I think, to your players. You're right.
Oh, 100%. But also it's one of those things that's like if your guys or girls like hold each other accountable, like if
Hmm.
I'm having a practice where I might be a little slow to start and guys
Yeah.
are like, "Hey, yo, coach, you all right? Like let's have a good practice. Like you're gonna be all right." And they might like tap you on the back or something, or they might come over and like grab me on the back of the neck or something like that and be like, "You good?" And I'm be like, "Yeah, I'm good." And I might grab them on the back of their neck or like smack, pat them on the back or things like that to where it's like, all right, now I'm good. Like I just needed kind of that, not necessarily, I don't need a reassurance from a high school kid, but like I know that they care about me at that point enough
They're checking.
to
Yeah.
do that. And like,
Yeah.
because they know I'm going to do the same thing to them as soon as I see their body language go down a little bit.
Yeah. That's really cool. I love when players do that. Coach, before we hit our concluding segment, I wanted to ask you this. We have, I'm sure, listeners who are first-time coaches just getting into this great profession. And what advice would you give to a coach kind of just starting on their coaching journey and how they, as best as they can, we know the first year is always crazy, but how, in the best way that a first-year coach can they be a coach who is demanding but also is demonstrating love and care to their players?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is just being true to yourself and like being true to the guys, like in the locker room or in the locker room, outside of locker room, outside of school, inside of school, no matter where it's at. Like if you're like kind of like what we just talked about, if you're a
Mhm.
coach that's going to have high energy, like have it all the time. Don't act different when it's time for basketball. Like be you. Like I'm teaching math class 3 classes a day. We've got 90-minute classes that happen, and I'm by the time my third math class is over, like I'm not going to have a voice because I've been going the whole time, and I'm not going to stop. And it's the same way. Like now I know I've got to, chug a little bit of water before basketball, get my voice back a little bit. But as soon as that's done, like I'm not going to have a voice again. And so it's just like be true to yourself, and don't let. It's so hard as a young coach, like getting caught up in wins and losses, but building your program. Uh, and again, the big word now is culture. Establishing the culture that you want is the most important part to me. And making those hard decisions with guys where, like I said, if you're not, I don't know if you've read John Gordon Energy Bus book, but it's like,
That's the energy vampires and everything.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love
yeah.
that
Big,
part.
big
Like,
teacher book too. That one.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you're gonna be like a energy sucker, like we don't want you on it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we want guys who are on this bus and they're on it for the right reasons, and that you may not see that result in 1 year, but the next 2, 3, 4 years, you're going to see that kind of evolve. And when you do, it's going to be really cool. But if you don't establish that early, it's really going to like kick you afterwards. And I think the last thing is really just be open for help. And again, it's one of those fine lines of you don't want people being like, this is what you do, this is what you should do, this is what you should do. Find something that you like for me, running the 5 out offense, and then kind of find other things. Go on X and find different drills, or go on Fast Model and look up one-on-one drills, or even like there's this dude that I really love some of the stuff he puts out, Matt Hackenberg.
Oh yeah.
He puts up some good stuff, man. And that's stuff that again, some coaches are so hard-headed that they're like, this is my way and I'm sticking to it. And you just can't really like, I think you can be successful that way, but I don't know if you can be successful super long term nowadays like that with such an evolving uh, culture that we've got right now.
Yeah. You got it. You
And
got it. I mean, the game changes a lot, right?
yeah, I mean, you think of like 10 years from now, or 10 years from now, who knows? It might Wembanyama might be the center that makes centers fun again, but also like he's out there shooting 3 pointers. So now every big post player in high school might be like, oh, if I'm 6'10", I'm shooting threes like Wembanyama. Like you never really know because it's going to change, and I'm sure You know, 15 years ago, if you would have said, all right, well, your high school teams, because we shoot a lot of threes in our
Hmm.
system. If you would have said 30 years ago, all right, or 15 years ago, your team's going to shoot 30 games or 33s a game or 25 threes a game, some people would be like, you're going to get blown out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like
Oh yeah.
you've got to you got to find what works best for your team, and you've got to be able to manipulate it however you want, and like I said, just be you.
No, no, well spoken, right? You be authentic, and you might make some mistakes along the way, but at least you were true to yourself. Then I think the rest of the stuff is easy to fix. I think trying to fake and be somebody else, that's long run burnout and exhaustion, and players will see through that. I think you can't hold on a fake image or a fake persona for too long. No, I definitely agree with you there.
Right. And I'm
Um,
gonna add like one
yeah,
small
go
thing on
for it.
top of that. And I'm sorry.
Oh no, don't have to. Go
I
ahead.
think like establish those connections, not even like the coaching connections. I think it's really good to like go to clinics. I think it's really good to do as much things as you can. If your state association has, like North Carolina, they put on a high school coaches clinic for a day, and I've got a couple buddies that do a couple other small clinics throughout the year. Those are super important, but also like take time for yourself. If you've got a family, like be with that family and leave basketball at, I don't want to say at school, because there are times at home that you have to watch the film, or you've got to establish practice plans and things like that.
Mhm.
But every second you get, like, be with your son or daughter, or be with your wife, or whatever it is, like be the husband, father, whatever it is that you have to be, like be that person. And then, because I think high school, whether it's high school or college kids, like they love seeing that, and they love, like, this year we're starting a thing where we're going to bring the varsity basketball team over to our house for a cookout.
Oh,
And
that's
I think
awesome.
that's going to be really cool. I think the guys are going to like it. And, if not, then we may not do it again. But if so, like that might just be a new thing that we do. And so it's
Hmm.
just like, you got to show kids that you care for them outside of basketball. And I think
Yeah.
once you do that, go to a team meal, make breakfast for them once a month, or, go get them biscuits before a Friday morning practice, or something small that will mean the world to the kids.
Mhm. No, no, that's the stuff they'll definitely remember. And I think to that first point you mentioned, it's kind of makes me think of the saying, like wherever it is, like be there, like right, be wherever your feet are. So if you're going to be a father, like be a father, be there in that moment completely. If you're at practice, be there completely in that moment. Don't try and do three or four things at once and try to be mentally somewhere else while you're physically somewhere, because then you're I don't
Right.
think you're getting anything done when you try to divide your attention up that way.
Yeah, 100%.
To wrap up, Coach, there's a couple questions I ask every guest, starting with this first one, which is thinking back on your coaching career. And I know you've shared a lot, so hopefully you have another you wouldn't mind sharing. What is a moment from your coaching career that you think by sharing it, our listeners would be able to learn from?
The This is kind of going back to like trust your instincts
Hmm.
as a young head coach, or even like if you're an established head coach. If you've got someone that doesn't fit your system or is not 100% bought in, like we had a kid who I was, even when I was an assistant coach at Union Pines, we had a kid that I was watching since sixth grade, and I had my eyes on him. And I was like, all right, this kid, like, he could be on varsity as a sophomore, and he could maybe start his junior year and senior year. Like, he could have really good minutes for us. And so he makes JV his freshman year. Sophomore year, he makes varsity. I take over as that he's going into his junior year. I'm like, look, man, this is what I expect for you. Like, I expect for you to really be a leader for us, and I expect for you to kind of set the tone for some of these younger guys. And he wasn't bought into it, and I kind of let it slide. And that's something that, going into his senior year now, he's got something that he can play with a little bit. And so me and him are kind of like button heads all summer. And I'm like, look, man, like, you've got to change, you've got to change, you've got to change. And I think we both kind of came to a common ground, like, this is what I expect from you. And he was doing it, like, and he was 100% bought in. And it's like, you well, at least we think he was bought in. And so in the back of my mind, I was second guessing myself, like, is he actually, is he actually, is he actually? So then the season comes around and he makes varsity and it just like, it didn't work out, like late to practices, things like that. And the whole time I, the day he quit, I was like, I knew this 2 years ago that I should have cut this tie. And I'm kicking myself because that's 2 years I could have spent on some of these other kids.
Yeah.
So trust your instinct, good or bad. And there's kids like I've got one of our 6'6" wings right now. Like the kid has all the potential in the world, but he knows I'm going to be really hard on him. And I think that that's what's going to make him a good player in the end is like, look, I'm not going to take it easy on you because I know when you get to college, because you're going to be a college basketball player, they're going to be even tougher on you. So we got to learn how to toughen your skin a little bit. And once we do that, like there might be times where you kind of got to put your ego to the side too. Like his freshman year, I love he might be one of my favorite kids 30 years from now that I talk about. Freshman year, he was on varsity, and this is the same 6'7", 6'6" wing that I'm talking about. And he was like, he just wasn't really bought in, but I was like, I know your potential. I just want you to like show these juniors and seniors what you got. You know what I mean? Like freaking bust their butts in practice and show me how good of a basketball player that you are because I know you've got it. And he didn't do that his freshman year, so we wound up sending him back down to JV. And like we even have that conversation. He's one of the kids that's in my math class today. He was like, "You remember that time at the JV, like at our Christmas tournament, you put this kid in over me?" He is like, "That really hurt my ego." And I was like, "I know it did, and I wanted it to because you needed to be humbled a little bit. But now look at you, like look at the growth that you've had since then." And like I'm super proud at the spot that you are, and now you've got to keep doing that, pushing forward.
Yeah. It was a big teaching moment for him.
Yeah, and so I think you've just got to be able to. There's going to be a lot of tough decisions that you have to make, and you might love the kids to death, or you may not really know the kid. Like I don't know any of these transfers that are coming in as well as I know some of the potential sophomores that could play on varsity or junior seniors that could be on varsity. But like if your team really buys into the new kids or they really take a kid under their arm, like trust your high schoolers. And that's crazy to say, but like when I was talking to the Catawba coach over the summer, I was like, "Coach, y'all went from fourth or fifth in the conference to like first the last 3-4 years. Like what happened?" And he was like, "Our dudes like each other." And he was like, "And that's translated to 7 or 8 wins a season just by them liking each other."
That's such a big difference that makes,
Yeah, for
like
sure.
that
And it's
chemistry part, right?
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Coach, to wrap up, I give every guest kind of what I call a 60-second soapbox. I kind of feel bad because I feel like that was such a great way to end on, but I'm gonna have you dig something else out for your soapbox. Maybe you have something ready. I'm not sure, but I like to use this kind of as a way to have you get out kind of a final message, a closing thought, a final idea, something that you just kind of want to leave the listeners with, and you can take it any direction you want, basketball or coaching wise. It is your soapbox after all. So, Coach, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor, and I'm going to let you take it from here.
I mean, we've kind of hit almost everything that I can talk about, but I think the biggest thing is you've got to. We talk about having fun with these guys or girls, whatever it is, your whatever sport it is you're coaching. Like have fun with them, and I think so many times we get lost on wins and losses, and maybe that's easy to say because we've had 2 losing seasons. But like this year, I expect us to have a winning season, and so it might look a little bit different at the end. But like my guys know that after basketball season ends, your senior year or your junior year, because I tell them like you don't know, you might get hurt in a game, and it might be your last time you ever touch basketball in high school.
Yeah.
And so like you've got to practice every time like it's your last practice. You've got to play every game like it's your last game. But like you also have to have one, don't let it overwhelm you as a player and a coach. And like just enjoy being in the moment with these kids. Because next thing you know that, and I think that's the super cool thing about high school also is we had 7 kindergarten through rising 8th graders come to our kids camp this year. And out of that, we had almost half of our varsity team, maybe even 3/4 of our varsity team, some of our JV players, and then 4 alumni from our school come back and help. And it's like you establish those connections. And I even told one of the alumni, I was like, look, man, as soon as you graduate, he plays at Roanoke right now. I was like, as soon as you graduate, if you want a job on my staff, I got you. And so it's like, I love the kid to death, but like, if you're so caught up on wins and losses, you don't really know the kids. And you've got to, after that senior year, their last game, like they may not even really care that their season's over because they're going to think about all the good things that happened. They might think of the bus rides. They might think of the team meals. So like, you've got to make sure that they enjoy that stuff. But I tell them in the end, like, it's so much more fun when you win, but you've got to, during the whole thing, you, in the process, you really have to enjoy it. And that it goes the same way as coaches. Like, you've got to enjoy it. Don't let it, it's going to stress you out at times, but like, find a hobby, find something to do that can take you away from your sport. Like for me, it's like right now I might play college football on PlayStation, or like I might, play with my kid until he goes to bed, or I might go read a book or something like, but find something that you can take your mind off of your sport and just relax. And again, just enjoy the process with the whole thing, and just have, like, you hate to say it, but like, you've got to have fun, because if you don't, you're going to be miserable.
No, yeah, always enjoy it, right? For the amount of time that we spend on this, I would hope that we're enjoying what we're doing, because if not, I think it's time to do something else, because we're spending way too
100%.
much time on this to be miserable during it. No, I agree, that work-life balance. I'm glad you mentioned that as well, about those other activities to do.
And
Coach
you've got to
Marks, really
expect that,
appreciate you
like,
coming on here talking about your coaching philosophy, high demands, high standards, but also at the same time, truly, I can tell that you care about your guys, care about your players, and want the best for them, not just as basketball players, but as people as well. So I know it's kind of a interesting time now at Union Pines with all the new guys coming in, but it sounds like they're gelling. Sounds like the team chemistry's there, and it sounds like a exciting season coming up. So best of luck, Coach, and again, really appreciate you coming on talking to us.
Thanks, Coach, and I appreciate you having me on. And
thank
best
you
of
guys.
luck for y'all. This is an awesome podcast, so hopefully you guys keep rolling with it.
Oh, I thank you. I sincerely appreciate it. That does mean a lot. Thank you guys so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.